Dear friends, there has been a second temple attack in Melbourne within a week. This time, the Shri Shiva Vishnu Temple in Melbourne has been vandalized. Uh, let's go straight to Melbourne. We are joined by the editors of the Australia Today, Jitad Jay Bharadwaj, and we are joined by Dr. Amit Sarwal as well, and we are joined by Mr. Makran from the Hindu Council in Melbourne, who are going to discuss and give us an update of what has actually happened. Jay, let me come to you first. What's the latest update? I mean, this is beyond disturbing. Can you give us an update about what's happened today? I think we have lost Jay. So let me first go to Amit. Amit, can you give us an update about what's happened so far?
Yeah, Pallavi. So, Shri Shiva Vishnu Temple is almost on the outskirts of Melbourne in Carrum Downs, which is an outskirt area. And now, this is one of the most historic and iconic temples in Victoria and maybe all over Australia. It was established around 1994. Prayers have been going around, like the temple was situated in a community hall or in a smaller place before that in 1994 with the help of the government. Hindus living in Melbourne, Victoria, created this iconic temple. And since then, I don't think there have been any such incidents of major vandalism, particularly by an ideology that is not welcome in any democratic or multicultural society. So, what has happened, I think, on the early morning of 16th January or on the eve of around that time, people noticed uh, some graffiti promoting Khalistani ideology on the gates and walls of Shri Shiva Vishnu Temple. This was very similar to um, the graffiti that we saw at the BAPS Swaminarayan Temple almost 5 days ago on 12th of January in Mills Park, which Victoria Police is still investigating. They have the CCTV footage. A good thing about Shiva Vishnu Temple is that because it is an iconic temple and people visit this temple a lot, there last year I think almost $390,000 were given to the temple committee to establish solar panels, solar lights, and CCTV. And this it was done, I think, completed in October 2021. And even this year, they have received a large grant to develop the temple premises. So the Victorian government and the Australian federal government has been very kind in previous budgets to give large amount of donation because they realize and they recognize that this is an a must visit place. This is one of the places that a large number of Tamil Sri Lankan Hindus, Indian Hindus, and Hindus from Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and other parts of the world also visit. It's a tourist place. If you go on TripAdvisor, you will see that this is a must visit place if you're coming to Melbourne. But the graffiti seems to be the same as the BAPS Swaminarayan Temple, particularly mentioning 26 January D-Day, Khalistan Zindabad. And this time it also writes Target Modi. If you remember, at BAPS Swaminarayan Temple, it was basically Modi is Hitler. So the graffiti is anti-India and also anti-Hindu in nature. Jitat is back with us, and he can update us on what people are saying about this particular vandalism. Jitat. Okay. Makranji, you can hear us, and you have been one of the most vocal Hindu activists around Melbourne. Can you shed some light on what's happening around, why these places are being targeted?
Thank you, Amitji. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so look, it is very unfortunate second attack in less than a week. Soft targets picked up BAPS Temple and then the Shiva Vishnu Temple, which is run by the Hindu Society of Victoria, one of the very old temples, as you mentioned. Uh, there is only one difference between the graffiti on the BAPS temple and this temple, which probably speaks a bit about our efforts which we have taken in the last uh, few days, talking to relevant authorities. If you remember the photographs and the videos from the BAPS temple, they also had wordings like Hindustan Murdabad,
Yes.
which clearly is a religious vilification.
Yes.
And if I may dare to say, it breaches the Religious and Racial Tolerance Act, which is in Victoria, which means you can you cannot vilify in any form, whether written or or spoken, against any religion, and that is at the backbone of the multicultural society and multi-faith society here. So it seems the message has gone to that community, whoever the miscreants are, and this time around they did not use the wording Hindustan Murdabad. They have, of course, said the other wordings, which is a separatist movement, as all of us know, and it is a ethnic issue related to India and has been going on for almost 4 decades. I know when it started back in early 80s when I was in school, and I have vivid memories of the uh, difficult time which especially the northern India went through. So it's unfortunate. Fortunately, what we have done here is we have gathered a lot of support from the multi-faith community. Practically every other faith community has expressed their solidarity with the Hindu community. And I must say, in this case, we have a supporting letter from Islamic Council of Victoria, Jewish Community Council of Victoria, Buddhist Council of Victoria, and Victorian Council of Churches, which constitute most of the population in Victoria. The matter has been reported to police, and of course, the police will take action. We have been also in touch with the government authorities, and whoever has done this is indeed illogical, whatever they are doing. The referendum and the other activities which are happening is something which is also going to disturb a lot of people. So we'll keep a close eye on the next steps, what is happening in the coming days.
Yeah. Amit, yeah, I would like to come in here. We also have Sarah L. Gates, who is a well-known academic with us. Sarah, the question to you is that there seems to be a pattern here, and the perception generally is that perhaps the people who are doing this are not afraid of the authorities at all, because otherwise, how can you have one incident and then within a week you have another incident? So, what does it say about the state of affairs, generally speaking?
Uh, well, I think the activities of the Khalistan separatist supporters in Victoria have been deliberately provocative toward the Hindu community. They know that their signs on their gurudwaras in the past have, they've anticipated some hostility with the community by placing signs that have language like Hindu fascists on the front of it. And unfortunately for the Australian public, they don't. There's a language barrier, so they're not going to understand when they go on TikTok, when they go on Facebook, what they read on Twitter, when it's not written in English. So it's very difficult for the Australian community to keep up. And so, they're operating in a type of multicultural vacuum, a culturally and linguistically diverse vacuum, where unless you've got skills in language, you don't know how far these actors are going to antagonize the Hindu community. So the police know that. I have spoken with the police in different parts of the country around these incidents, and really pushed that they need to have people monitoring the social media environment to test the waters, to find out how far these actors will go, because where there's hate speech combined particularly with threats, whether or not they're implicit or suggested threats against the community to conduct any type of violent activity, including this graffiti, that needs to be picked up and monitored very, very closely, especially if it breaks the law. And where these actors are coming in from outside the community, from foreign countries, which we're seeing in these incidents online, particularly if you search on Twitter, you'll see that there's a lot of so-called accounts from, there's some of them look like they're from Pakistan, some of them look like they're from Canada, the USA, and some of them look like they're from India, and some of them look like they're from Australia. But it's very difficult to tell unless you have, the powers that the security agents have to actually find out, where these accounts are coming from. So there are threats being made against the community online, and some of them do break Australian laws, as Makarand said. They're vilification, and some of them are beyond hate speech, where they're making threats. That we're going to deal with you, we're going to come out after you, or even you're a bunch of cowards, and expressing their misogynistic type of aggression toward the community. These are types of things that need to be very carefully understood. And yes, they do operate in a kind of vacuum. So I do actually think that you're right there, Pallavi. I think that they think that we don't know what's going on out here. We white Australians don't understand the situation, but I think you'd be surprised that people can actually find information out for themselves, and they can use translate underneath posts on comments, and they can read them. So even if they're in foreign languages, quite often they can be read. And I think people really need to be monitoring this, especially someone in the Hindu community needs to have a job, a full-time job, just monitoring this environment. Yeah, because they are acting as if they're outside of the law, and they're above the law, and the laws don't apply to them.
Yeah, Jay, I would like to get you in here. This seems like open provocation now. This has gone beyond just a graffiti or doing things covertly or here and there. This is open provocation. This is like openly telling people that we can do whatever we want to do, and that's it. There's nothing you can do about it. And as we have discussed again and again, that this is not just about a graffiti. This is traumatizing. This is harassment. This leaves a deep impact not just on the Hindu community, but on the Indian Australian community, because all Indians, Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, everyone has seen terrorism in the Punjab terrorism and other forms of terrorism in India. So what is your initial input on this?
See, Pallavi, I can tell you, I'll move forward from the report which we have just produced. That second Hindu temple has been vandalized by Khalistan supporters. A lot of people were questioning that how do you know what has happened? So I can tell you now on Australia Today that Gurpat Vansingh Panu has released a video with the same modus operandi, with the same wording which have been graffitied on the Shiva Vishnu Temple. In the video, he says that Delhi New D-Day, and the same wordings are to be seen there on the Shiva Vishnu Temple's walls. So he's urging, he'll be doing a press conference here where Australia Today, they are so scared of us that they have barred us from entering that place. We might ask them the questions why they are putting this fear, terrorism kind of tactics on peaceful Hindu communities. So they are not letting us get into that space of press conference. However, I can also tell you that Gurpat Vansingh Panu has rewarded $500,000 for anyone who will put a Khalistan flag on Red Fort in India. So all these tactics can tell you what these desperate Khalistan provogators are right now doing on Australian soils. And it's not only disappointing, it kind of angered a lot of community members here in Australia whom I have talked to, and they are upset with the handling of this whole scenario by Australian federal government as well as Victorian government here in Melbourne. Pallavi?
Yes. Mr. Makran Bhagwat, we would like to come back to you that what is the Hindu Council of Australia planning to do beyond this point? Because this is getting a very serious situation because there are families who go to the temples, and and there's a fear that is this just going to end here? Is this going to get worse? And as we have seen in the past, that there, whether it's in the reporting, in mainstream media and things like that, these incidents are kind of reported in a manner that, oh, it's some kind of inter-Indian community tensions, and there are false equivalences that are made, that, oh, it's from this side and that side and so on and so forth, while we know that the provocation is coming from one side. That are in this case Khalistani supporters. Their association with alleged association with ISI is also pretty well known in geopolitical circles. So moving on from here, what steps is the Hindu Council of Australia likely to take if the authorities don't get the situation under control?
Magranji, you are on mute.
Thank you. So, look, Hindu Council of Australia is a national Hindu organization, and I represent the Victoria chapter. So, we represent the Hindu faith at the state and federal level, at the Multicultural Commission, and also the government level. So, we advise the government on matters related to faith, whether it is Hindu, Christian, Jewish, Islamic, whatever. Now, this matter is ethnic as well as religious or faith related. But there is a fine line now. So what we have done so far is we have also approached our contacts in the government and have given them our side of the story, because obviously we know that they are also contacting the other communities to get their side of the story. And it is up to the government to then make a decision on the seriousness of the issue and take proper actions. I can't comment on the actions because the police investigation is currently on, and we are in touch with Victoria Police as well, and also the government. We are trying to get some concrete answers from the government and the police to then transmit it to the wider community, to give them a feeling and reassurance that despite these attacks, which are unfortunate and difficult, the Hindu community can live in peace and without any fear in the coming days and weeks and months. So we will see how it gets panned out, because we are having meetings every day, and we also are watching closely the 29th of January date. Although once again, I must say that that matter on 29th of January is a matter for ethnicity or separatist movement, but whenever it crosses the line and it intrudes on the faith space, we will definitely watch that. So that's all I can say at the moment. We are working very closely, but I can't comment any more on that. Thank you.
Yeah. Now I would like to get you back, Amit, into the conversation, that this is a larger issue now. It seems that there's also an attempt to derail the India-Australia relationship here, because obviously, on one hand, if Australia claims that India is a great friend and they are members of the Quad, there's an economic treaty, as we keep talking about it over and over again. It seems that there's definitely an attempt to do that, because India, I am not sure how the Indian government is going to react immediately, but surely if a friendly country is allows in any manner or form, any kind of separatist activities against a country that they allow, that they call a friend or an ally, it sounds like an oxymoron. Amit, what is your take on that? Do you think that this is a larger issue here? It's not just a specific issue about some Khalistani supporters spraying graffiti over a temple. This concerns Australian national security, Australia's interests here as well are being challenged.
Definitely. These kind of pseudo political, so-called new state ideologies are usually very desperate, and this will concern Australian securities as well, security of the common people of Australia, because I think me and Sarah both have been pointing out, to the Australian authorities to learn from the Canadian experience. Ultimately, it was the Canadian citizens who paid a heavy price for these movements, and the present Khalistani movement is trying to disassociate themselves while celebrating the terrorists who bombed the Indian Airlines, right? So these two things cannot go hand in hand. You can't say we are a peaceful movement and at the same time there is blood on your hands. So also, the timing of this is, particular vandalisms and the referendum is very, very questionable, because if you look at the past Liberal government, Scott Morrison and others, they have been very close to India and they formed a very good economic relationship. There were certain factors, particularly China, right? But if you look at Australia and India, as my research shows, have been very close allies. The relationship has been wavy but very strong. There have been incidents in our past relationship, particularly India's nuclear tests and other. But Australia has been a very supportive partner, especially it has been welcoming Indian students from all over, all parts of India. So somewhere I agree with you that a country like Pakistan, which has been sponsoring, and I'm not saying this, there have been case studies by n number of scholars who have pointed out in their books that Khalistan is a creation of Pakistan, ISI. And Canada has paid a very heavy price. If you look at Australia-India relations, and if you look at Canada-Australia-India relations, Australia-India relations are very strong. Canada is trying to mend its relationship with India. They have been trying to curb Khalistani menace, but it has taken so much roots within Canada that it's very hard, right? So Canada and USA especially Canada and UK became the hubs of Khalistani activity. I think Sarah has also warned the Australian authorities that they should look into the matter. Right now, social media is the place where all the activity is happening. So if you are going to look for uh, evidence regarding this activity, you'll have to be on TikTok, Facebook, and WhatsApp and other channels, because they are building a narrative about India, a fake narrative about India, a narrative about genocide and some other things which is not actually happening. I've just returned from India. There is no such thing going on, but the narrative that they are creating on social media using Punjabi, Urdu, Hindi and English, uh, is that India is a dangerous place, basically, and that's what they are trying to highlight it. But by targeting Hindu temples, the message or the interpretation of their message is very clear. They are not just anti-India; they are anti-Hindu as well. So, the larger question is, why should Australia or Australians support such an ideology which believes in getting rid of other people or their ideologies or their religions? So I think Jitat pointed out beautifully that now the Khalistan referendum people are kind of afraid of the Australia Today, because someone told them that Australian media doesn't pick up such stories. And that's what's have been happening. People have been sweeping such stories under the carpet. They were not highlighting it, and therefore these people were getting a kind of boost. But I don't think anymore.
All right. Sarah, I would like to get you back here. That, there's another problem here, especially with, how the mainstream media covers these issues and things like that. We have been seeing for a while that absolutely false and fake narratives, absolutely false equivalence about India, about Hindus, or about the Indian government have been propagated, and of course one can agree and disagree, one can criticize a country or a leadership or anything that's happening even within a community, but we know that a lot of it is just absolute false fake narrative, it's propaganda. And it seems that the mainstream media in Australia, it appears, is either intentionally or unintentionally giving into that. And even if we look at the coverage, I mean, I mean, I have repeated this before, that I cannot imagine that a mosque or a synagogue in Australia, or a church being attacked in this fashion, and no editorials, no massive coverage on it being religious vilification or hate speech or threat to the community. So what is your take on that?
Well, we've seen for some time, particularly since the farmers' protests, the environment in Australia has, I guess, become hostile toward Hindus on the back of arguments made by a very small group of very well-connected and clearly funded activists who work in coordination with academics, NGOs who lobby the government. Some members of the government have taken up the cause and made public statements, public announcements, which have spread, I think, what I'll call dog whistles against the Hindu community, targeting and singling out the Hindu community for some type of activities that they, in a very woolly way, suggest are happening in India, as if what's happening in Australia is somehow as if the people in Australia, the Hindus in Australia, are somehow responsible for often very unclear allegations that Hindus are oppressing people in India and so forth. So we've seen this business escalating, and unfortunately, some of the Australian broadcasters have taken those voices, those activists, and amplified their, I would call it propaganda, because when you look at, the arguments and the claims they make, they're really based on really thin, very thin grounds. In fact, lies. I would say lies. So why are they lying about Hindus? And, is it to justify more vilification because they've just become more bold and started using slogans against Hindus in, public places, like places of worship? And this really is something, that the council have, demonstrated is not part of our multicultural ethos. Those signs have been pulled down. So if the signs are being pulled down repeatedly, why do they keep being put up? And I think there needs to be some consequences and an investigation into the type of community messaging. So we've got community messaging problems. And just as Pallavi raised this point, I was looking on Twitter at the community messaging from world leaders concerning BAPS temples, and there's been a lot in the past week. Anthony Albanese, Dr. S. Jaishankar, Swami Mukundananda, Evan Mulholland, we had Jason Wood, we've had the, Noel Gillen, we've had Ambassador of Israel, that's the Ambassador of Israel to India, the Australian Consulate in Mumbai, Barry O'Farrell, I don't know, the list goes on. We've had very high profile messaging and communications on Twitter concerning BAPS. None of it has been about mutual respect for Hindus. They could have phrased it positively. They didn't have to say this is a Hindu, that, BAPS have been subjected to Hindu phobic hate crimes worldwide. They didn't have to make it an ugly message. but they could have said this is a time, to emphasize community, social cohesion, mutual respect, and to, I guess, recognize the contributions of different cultural worldviews, different ways of seeing the world, whether they're Hindu or any other culture. But they didn't. They didn't take the opportunity to call out hate crime, and we haven't seen any strong community messaging. And similarly, I mean, there's been condemnations, but we haven't seen any commitment to, bring this community messaging from the establishments into line. So we need a commitment, because when this is coming from the top, when, authorities in religious, I guess, organizations are approving this type of messaging from the top, what it says to the people in that organization who attend these places of worship is it's okay. It's okay to vilify. It's okay to be hateful. It's okay to target a community. And that's what we've been seeing. So the community messaging needs to be more responsible. And there's been opportunities that have been missed. And I don't know why they've been missed. It's just crazy to see that, mainstream media hasn't even reported on this in Australia. It's a media blackout.
Yeah, and Jed, I would like to get you in here that it just seems like a media blackout, as Sarah said, and I have repeated this before, that if this had happened on a mosque or a synagogue or a church or even a gurudwara, do you reckon that there would have been this kind of silence in the Australian media? And we see this over and over again, that when it comes to reporting on India, it's really skewed. I mean, it's skewed to an extent that it absolutely appears like propaganda, where you keep doing negative stories on India, take one incident and then amplify it, while you never report anything, or very rarely report anything good, and that's why I think it's the credibility of the media that has taken a hit. But that's another point. How can this be that the Australian mainstream media has not covered this at all, when Indian media has picked up the story, and when this is open vilification? This is what else is described as a hate crime, what else is described as as religious vilification. I cannot I can't wrap my head around it. I'm in India currently, but I just can't wrap my head around this.
See, Pallavi, is kind of unfortunate. And if I can say the word, this is how it works. This is how Australia works. There are two examples which I can give you to make you understand this whole media structure or scenario, if I could say so. One of my colleague journalists in UK, London, asked me that, Jai, why has any mainstream media or Australian white media, I would love to call that, have they reported on this? I said, no. She said, no, but if it was UK and such an incident would have happened, definitely all the white media which you call, they would have reported on this. Why is it happening in Syria that nobody is responding? So I'll take you to another scenario to make you understand how it is. So there is another colleague of mine. He's a journalist, works for a Australian big newspaper. What he told me is, we do not get into any multicultural stories because of the backlash which we face. And we are not ready, or our editors are not ready to understand that there are polarized views in the community, and that kind of backlash is all right. So he was saying, I'm willing to do the story, but my editor is not passing it on. He's saying do some other story, because there'll be 10,000 people who will be saying XYZ. If you do a Khalistan story, it is vilification of Sikhs. If you do a story on Muslims, it's a vilification of Muslims. So our hands are so tight that we don't get into multicultural stories at all, unless it's a feel-good story. So there are two poles of these questions. However, then there is one more thing. Australian white media has not given opportunities to people who look like me or Amit Sarwal or Pallavi to be in that newsroom. So they have absolutely no understanding of these issues, and they have no access to the resources which we have developed within the community. So when we get these stories, we bring these stories all the time. They don't want to put their time and effort in developing those resources. They just don't care. Well, as if nothing has happened. It's a big story that two important Hindu temples have been vandalized. Not only I have talked to the police authorities. What they are telling me is a graffiti issue. Somebody has done a graffiti on the temple, so we always work closely with the local councils. So the council will come and remove the graffiti. There is nothing so big. So these people don't have that understanding, be it geopolitical understanding, be it issues which are running. They are probably, I'm not sure whether a police constable who is working on this graffiti issue or temple vandalization has some understanding of social media, as Amit has said, that what is trending on Twitter. I received, after I have broken this story this evening, I received those videos. Gurpat Singh Pannu is propagating, standing in a weird way and telling whosoever will go and put Khalistan flag on Red Fort, he will pay $500,000. The same logo of D-Day, Dali D-Day, is there in his poster, which has been graffitied on Shiva Vishnu Temple. What else semblance do you need? Do you need somebody to take a selfie there after making the graffiti and tell, oh, I am Khalistan supporter and I have done this graffiti? Is that the evidence are you seeking? I mean, I don't understand what kind of system this system, people call it perfect, but it's fragmented system where one part doesn't know what is happening on the other side of the ground. There are experts like Sarah, there are other experts who understand these factors, but these police authorities or security authorities or political leadership, they don't even talk to them. They don't, there is no willingness to even understand these subjects, which a large chunk of Australian population, which is Indian Australian or for that matter, Sri Lankan Indian Hindus or Malaysian Hindus or Fijian Hindus or Nepalese Hindus, all go to the same temple and they are facing the same thing. There is a population of 1.5 million people here in Australia, those who have been targeted by these goons of Khalistan, and nothing is being done. This is just baffling. I'm really so upset right now.
Can I
Amit,
just chip in?
yeah,
Pallavi,
I was just, yeah.
Yeah, so Jitat pointed out one facet of how journalism and media works. There is another facet where you have some Indians who are working in public broadcasting or mainstream media who have got these jobs on bogus, by overselling themselves, which was very easy. What the editors or the hiring committee wanted to listen to, they just told the same things, but they have not been as achieving as they projected themselves to be. And on the other hand, I was kind of shocked that how a public broadcaster can send a foreign correspondent, and Jitat probably knows that foreign correspondents have a very big baggage on their shoulder, because they are representing two countries. They have to report very, very dedicatedly and fact wise on a country like India, which is a partner country for Australia, and a triple J journalist who has been promoting alternate music for 2 years was selected for the job by a public broadcaster. And that shows you how serious Australian broadcasting, media, communication are about India. You can just handpick anyone who looks, maybe, Jitat has a problem about they don't hire people who look like him, but they do actually hire people who look like him. But they hire people who do not know exactly how much we know. So that's the thing. I think it's not about hiring people who look like Sarah. Knows more about India, but she doesn't look like me, and she can pass as Punjabi, obviously, who speaks with an Australian accent. But the point is that we actually, when your relationships are going really strong, India-Australia partnership is going strong, you need people who know about both countries. You actually need people who travel in two boats. You do not need people who are trying to sink both the boats. That's the whole issue.
Right.
I would like to ask this question to Sarah again. That although Jay mentioned that that sometimes maybe the reporters don't want to cover multicultural communities when there are sensitive issues, but again, I do not think that if there was an anti-Semitic graffiti in front of a synagogue, or there was some ugly graffiti on a mosque in Australia, where it was very apparent who are the people who are putting these graffitis, that the mainstream media would just not do anything. And as Jay pointed out, that the Hindu community in Australia, it does not just comprise of people of Indian origin. There are Hindus from various nationalities or ethnicities who have come and settled in India. And do you think that this is something that particularly relates to the Indian Australian, specifically the Hindu Australian community, that because it's a very peace loving community, highly educated, highly tax paying, assimilate very easily, winning awards, getting recognition everywhere, and because they don't indulge in any sort of mostly any sort of antisocial activities, and are contributing largely in a peaceful manner, that they then become targets because they're taken for granted, that they're not taken seriously enough, because you would mostly not expect a Hindu to get down on the streets and create chaos and violence. Do you think that maybe at some level, the fact that the Indian Australian and specifically the Hindu Australian community, because they are so peaceful, and because they don't retaliate in any way or don't become aggressive in any way, that's actually resulting in it being a disadvantage for the community, that they can just be vilified like this, and the authorities just don't seem to care?
Okay, so let's look at the hate crime problem that we have in the West. The main targets for hate crime in the West are the Jewish community. So anti-Semitism is the highest, hate crime by, even per capita. If you look at it, it's exponentially high. And considering the size of the community is absolutely a micro community, pretty much everywhere, like worldwide. The Jewish community are similarly represented as people with money, people who are, part of, the system at a high level, who have power and authority in the community. This whole globalism narrative that people talk about with Jews has been now mapped onto Hindus. So it's this ideology of anti-Hindutva and anti-Zionist that they claim to be opposing India and Israel, but which ends up targeting Jews and Hindus. And every time a Jew is targeted in the community, in the same way as every time a Hindu is targeted, whether it's a death threat that's been made online, or if it's this type of graffiti, it targets everyone. It sends a message to everybody that there are particular people within the community that hate you and that will hurt you and harm you, because this is an act of violence, this graffiti. So this thing about being highly successful, having low representation in prisons, being unlikely to commit violent offences, not engaging in activism on the streets, huge protests and demonstrations and so forth, that doesn't make Hindus more or less targeted, but it certainly does fit a profile, of law-abiding citizens. And to trigger and antagonize law-abiding citizens, to come down to that level of like trench warfare on the streets, it doesn't work with Hindus. And in the same way, it doesn't work with Jews. They are not going to bring themselves down to that level to start engaging in reciprocal violence. And we saw that in Leicester. In fact, none of the hate crimes that were committed, even though the Hindus did demonstrate, which is quite rare, there were 200, 300 Hindus demonstrating, but they had been targeted by 200 or 300 Muslims demonstrating as what they call Muslim patrols through highly densely populated Hindu suburbs, and actually attacking people's houses and cars. So there's a big difference, I think, even when there are protests and demonstrations, between the kinds of violent demonstrations that we see. In Leicester, we saw violent demonstrations in Leicester and the kinds of demonstrations that are happening here. So we don't want that model, whether it's a peaceful protest with a violent counter-protest, which is what happened there. We don't want that happening here. And I think Hindus are very reluctant, and they were surprised to see people marching on the streets. But there does come a time when, if you are ignored over and over and over again, people will get frustrated. And you'll see something like what we saw with Vishal Jude, where he went into the mob. So him, and I think there was a few other people with him, but he went into that demonstration, that I think it was a farmers' rally, and held up the Indian flag, right? He wanted to make a point, that we're going to hold our ground, and we don't agree with this. Our community doesn't agree with this. That was, I think, the point that he was trying to make. But for doing so, it was just non-stop propaganda. So that one person was made an example of. And so when they do that to one Hindu, and they call him an extremist and a terrorist, and they say he's an example of what's happening in diaspora, and all of the Hindu nationalists in diaspora are a risk and a threat to other religious communities like Sikhs and Muslims. Both of them have been named, right, at a high level. When they do that, it's an attempt to stop you from going out and demonstrating and proactively, participating in, democracy as citizens. So
Yeah.
It's a very dangerous game, because if you silence people, and on the other hand, you demonize people when they speak up or they stand up for themselves, and you don't provide any avenues for any kind of conflict resolution, it's just going to build and build and build. And I can't see that the Hindus are going to end up, retreating from their values and their principles, but they may end up being protest, counter-protest type of incidents. I don't know what's going to happen, but we saw what happened in Leicester, and we saw that totally swept under the carpet and reversed. The victim-perpetrator model reversed. And that was done by the mainstream media. So is there some geopolitical agenda? I don't understand. I mean, how can it be so consistent in Australia, in Canada, in America, in Europe, and in UK, the way that Hindus are being portrayed in the media on such scanty evidence? It's really quite dangerous, and coupled with a lack of safety precautions, a lack of safety awareness, safety training, a lack of social media monitoring, hate crime monitoring, and the denial that such a thing as Hindu phobia exists. And people like me who talk about it and who research it and who know the history of Hindu phobia are being called Nazis just for reading news articles. I'm a Nazi just for reading news articles and from archives, as a scholar, and for looking at the systems and the patterns of perpetration through history, and looking, through that lens of, okay, this has happened here and here before, and it's repeating itself now. If we can't learn from history, if that makes us a Nazi, we are being absolutely pushed into a corner and silenced. And that's my biggest problem, is this BDS style campaigning, people targeting people at work if they happen to be in any way proudly Hindu or to stand up for Hindus. They are targeted. There's complaints made about them. Campaigns run against them. I mean, when is the Australian government going to realise that this is a very dangerous, situation for social cohesion?
Yeah, and we will take our concluding comments now. Now, Jed, this is a very important point that Sarah made, and this is what I was talking about when I was talking about false equivalence. Right? That say if we report on the facts, we report on the truth, then we are vilified, we are given names. As Sarah mentioned, that you turn the entire narrative upside down, that you make the perpetrator into a victim and the victim into a perpetrator. Now, just concluding comments. Where do we go from here? We have personally been vilified, we have been bullied online. We will not stop speaking the truth, but how do we make the Australian authorities, the Australian government, understand that this is a very dangerous and serious issue, not just for the Indian Australian or the Hindu Australian community? This is a risk to Australian security. After all, Europe has witnessed several terrorist attacks because they kept probably sitting on issues where they should have intervened. When are the Australian authorities going to wake up that that fake narratives which are being created against the Hindu community or India at this stage, and the vilification that one has seen against the Jews, in terms of anti-Semitism for several decades? When are they going to wake up to the reality and intervene and say enough is enough?
Pallavi, I have only one line to say that I'm a journalist. Amit Sarwal is a journalist. You are a journalist. We will keep on doing our job. And me and Amit will be there tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, where Gurpat Singh Pannu is there. Gurpat Vant Singh Pannu. I can't say his name, idiotic name it is. Anyways, I'll be there reporting on what he is up to. That man is trying to be a Osama bin Laden of Khalistan movement. So we will be asking him questions. We'll be trying to wake authorities. That's our job. That's what we can do. I can assure each and everyone, all Australia Today's readers and viewers, that we will bring you all the news as factual as possible, and we will not go back from there.
Amit, your concluding words, and then we'll end the broadcast.
I think Jay has summarized it well as Sarah, that we are doing our duty, and we want the authorities in Australia and also India and other parts of the world to do their duty. Make a concrete statement. Do not keep people confused about such movements. They have no rightful place in democratic and multicultural societies. So instead of keeping people in dark in your country, it would be best for the Australian federal and Victorian state government to send out a clear message, as they have done in the past with certain ideological groups who have tried to infiltrate Australia, and they have sent a very clear message that you are not welcome. So I just request both Australian federal and state government, and also the multicultural media, to not remain silent, because silence is often seen as being part of the narrative that they are trying to build. So speak up, Ram.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and to all our viewers. We will keep you posted. We'll keep getting you updates. And journalism is about telling the truth fearlessly and honestly. And at the Australia Today, we will keep doing that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.